This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Today we're making a little follow-up video to the V60 technique for a one-cup brewer that I published, I think, just a few days ago. Now, I'm very happy with that technique, I'm very proud of that technique, but it did generate a bunch of questions, and I thought it was appropriate to make a video to answer as many of them as I could to kind of clarify a few things around the brewing technique, including the most controversial one of all. Was I wrong? Did I give you bad advice? We shall find out. Anyway, here's how it's going to work. There's about 10 different questions or topics that I want to talk about today. We're just going to go through them one by one and hopefully answer the many different questions that you had. So the first question is kind of a question around swirling versus stirring the bloom. Generally, I like swirling the bloom for a few reasons. It's quick, it's easy, it requires no additional tools. It's pretty easy to be consistent, but as I point out in the video, excessive swirling can kind of clog the paper. And for people that have a grinder that produces, say, more than average fines, it's a cheaper grinder, is this still the best thing to do? And I would say maybe, but it's probably worth trying a stir. A stir is something I used to recommend before I kind of got into swirling. Stirring might be a better way. The goal is just to make sure that all of the coffee is getting wet as soon as possible without excessive agitation of the coffee. If you stir one bit a lot, you'll start the extraction of that bit going more aggressively, and you maybe don't want to do that. So you're just looking to have a kind of even distribution of water from the beginning. And again, you're just trying to get the grounds that you can see that are still dry into the mix, and that's it. So really not too much work, not too much stirring going on, just a thorough mixing of water and coffee. When it comes to the end of the brew though, I would still recommend that just gentle swirl at the end. You don't need to use a spoon a second time. Now, a lot of people ask, can you use the same technique on a 2-cup brewer? And there's kind of two ways to interpret this question. So I'll start with the easy one. Can you use 15 grams to 250 and the same ratios and everything else in a 2-cup brewer? And the answer is 100% yes. They are, as far as the coffee is concerned, pretty much identical. The hole at the bottom is the same size, the angle is the same, the ridges inside are the same. So all the same things apply. If you've only got a 2-cup brewer, you don't need to buy an additional 1-cup brewer. A 2-cup will work well for a single 15-gram dose of coffee brewed to 250 mils. Don't worry about it. The more complex question would be, could I scale this technique up all the way to, say, 30 to 500 grams? And I guess you probably could, and it would probably work well. I like the original V60 technique because it was kind of the simplest technique to get to good coffee. And I know that didn't work across the entire range as well as I hoped, as in it wasn't perfect for a 1-cup brew. But I think for a 2-cup brew, I really like it. I think it's simple, relatively easy to do, and easy to be consistent with. But if you want to experiment with this, please do. I haven't done all the work to calculate, what the ideal pour rate is for that deeper, heavier bed of coffee, but it should still basically work well. If you do experiment, compare the two. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Another very common question was about applying this technique to flatbed brewers. These are brewers like the April that I have here, or the Kalita, or the Stag, or a bunch of other sort of flatbed brewers. And the answer is probably, but I don't know. To try and come up with a good technique, we do a lot of testing, and that is kind of going narrow and deep. We haven't done a lot of testing with this brewer. We haven't done a lot of testing with other brewers either. It is on the agenda. It is on the list of things we would like to do, but I can't with all certainty say, yes, this will work perfectly well on those brewers, though I can't immediately see an issue with the technique in terms of why it wouldn't work well. But if you experiment again, let us know down in the comments below what worked and what didn't. So let's talk grind size, because this is a very heavily requested topic, particularly for the Comandante, where people asked how many clicks on the Comandante was my grind setting. And the answer is, for the Comandante, a little easier than the other one. The answer here is around 25 to 30. Really depends on the coffee. It depends on the water that you're using as well. But it was that kind of a ballpark there for light roasts. For more developed medium roasts, I might be a little coarser. For dark roasts, I might be coarser again still. I don't really feel comfortable giving, say, a sort of target micron range of like 600 microns as a target size, because particle size distributions are extremely variable. And just because your peak is there, it doesn't mean your total surface area kind of matches mine. So your extraction will be different, your flavor will be different, your experience will be different. The best guidance remains, frustratingly, taste. Does it taste good? Does it taste empty, hollow? Is it missing something? Does it taste a little dry and a little bitter? Those are the kind of taste feedback things that you're looking for to guide you to the right grind size. But yeah, that's kind of it. I would say if you're desperate to know, start maybe around 30 for typical coffee on here. You might need to go finer, you might need to go a touch coarser, but that's the kind of ballpark from absolute zero on the Comandante that I have here in the studio. Another common question was, why did we use 10-second pauses between the pulses? Why that particular number? And that's a good question. We did experiment with longer pauses and letting the bed drain out, entirely. What we saw there was once the water drains out of the bed, that bed rapidly cools down, which is kind of interesting. It just loses its thermal mass and it cools down, and your next pulse heats it back up again, but not as much. And so we found that keeping sort of some water in the cone at all times helped with temperature stability throughout the brew. But that 10 seconds helped stretch the brew out, increase the contact time, give the bed a chance to settle again and not constantly be churned over and over again, which could lead to more unevenness, more channeling potentially. There may be a better number, this may be 12 or 15, but 10 seemed nice, easy to replicate. And that is a big part of what I'm chasing with the techniques, which is it's easy to remember and it's easy to do, because the more finicky and overly specific it gets, and I know this is a more complex technique already than the original, but if I take it even further than that, it's just more frustrating to make coffee that way, especially before you've had coffee. Now, the next two questions are kind of linked to each other. It's about established and existing techniques that were out there ahead of time. One question is often, is this just Matt Winton's recipe? Now, if you don't know Matt Winton, he is a very skilled coffee professional. He's won the World Brewers Cup, and he has a 5-pour technique on Harrier's website, and I'll link that down below. You can check it out. His is a little different. It's not as focused on kind of controlling agitation the same way that mine is. And I think he's using a slightly coarser grind and going for a different style of brew. But I still think it's a good technique, and I still think we probably ended up at the same place for very similar reasons. I didn't watch his technique before making the video. I didn't really watch anyone's techniques. The way that we do testing is we kind of go variable by variable and then slowly start to build it up into a total recipe and test out and see what works. So I was aware of him, and I had sort of a vague recollection of it, but I wasn't sure of it. But I think if you brewed his recipe and mine side by side, there'd be a different level of extraction. I suspect I'm chasing a slightly higher overall extraction in terms of technique and style and end cup, but I think both would potentially be delicious, I hope. Coffee has no one good answer, and so I would definitely recommend trying his version of the technique and seeing what you like and what you don't. The other question I got a lot was, is this just Tetsu's 4-6 method, sort of with a new spin? And the answer is, I don't think so. Again, there are a bunch of similarities, and again, I suspect we ended up at similar places for similar reasons. As I've said, what I'm chasing with mine is replicable agitation and kind of control over the sort of entire brew. I think the 4-6 method is designed to be a much more flexible brew method where you kind of push and pull extraction around in different places to end up with different results. I think that's interesting, but it's ultimately a very different philosophy of coffee brewing. And again, I suspect the coffees that we each brew often or were sort of being brewed for that method and what I'm using might be a little bit different. Like I said, there's no one good answer. If you haven't tried it, you should totally try it. Moving on. One question that has popped up a few times is, can you use a WDT tool to kind of do a stirred bloom phase, what some people are calling the wet WDT technique or the WWDT, just to make things impossibly complicated. Now, there's been a few people who've talked about using these as part of the kind of bloom process. I think it definitely is interesting. If you have one, have a play with it. It's kind of fun. It's amazing how clean these things come out having stirred wet ground coffee. They seem to come out pristinely clean, which is wonderful. It's worth an experiment. It's absolutely not worth buying one of these just to make a V60 with, but if you've got one in your coffee making setup, then yes, have a little play. I like the brews I get, but I'm constantly chasing the least possible tools and sort of stuff in my coffee making, so I tend not to use it. I think in espresso, it's getting to the point of being essential in a lot of home espresso prep, but for a V60, fun to play with, and if you think it really improves your cup, then keep with it. But overall, just an interesting little sort of mixture of different styles of coffee prep in one place. Now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the thing that was the most controversial thing I said in that video, the thing that got the most criticism, and the thing in which people think I am the most wrong about. And I'll tell you what it is after a short ad from this video's sponsor, which is Squarespace. If you need a website or a domain, then I would recommend checking out Squarespace. You probably have a great little idea at the back of your mind that you should turn into reality, and Squarespace is a great way to do it. Because you start with one of their templates. You're not just staring at a blank page, and you begin to fill it with your words and your ideas, and it can be for anything. It can be for a book. It might be for a portfolio of your work. It might be for your business, your cafe. You want to showcase yourself in the best way to the digital world. And Squarespace lets you do that. You can turn your site into an e-commerce site very easily. You can do members-only content if you want to do something similar like that and have people support you as you create your work. What I always say is don't take my word for it. Sign up at the link below for a free trial and just build something. Look around, play, explore, and when you create something and you're ready to launch, well, use code James Hoffmann for 10% off any website or domain. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So it's time to address the area in which I might have been wrong. I might have made a mistake. I might have caused some controversy, pretty mild controversy, frankly. The topic is preheating the brewer when you're rinsing the paper. I said it's perfectly acceptable to use the hot water from a kitchen tap because I thought it was less wasteful. And many of you disagreed with that. And it's going to take us to some strange places in terms of an answer, right? So one quick thing. Let me tell you why I prefer to use hot water from a kitchen sink. A few different reasons. Firstly, the hot water turns up pretty quickly most of the time. And so I don't feel particularly wasteful when I run the hot tap. If yours takes ages to come through, yes, that should definitely factor into your decision. Secondly, I don't like sort of boiling water in a kettle to pour through this thing because that water is either going to be tap water, which is really hard and I'll get a scale in my kettle. I don't want that. Or it's going to be my coffee water, which is ultimately relatively expensive and I don't really want to waste that either. I make recipe water for all the sort of water we brew with here, so it's always consistent across testing, across videos, all that stuff. So that's why I like the hot water from the hot tap. If you do want to use water from a kettle, then I want you to use as little as possible. If you just pour your hot water on top and have it drain through, it does very little preheating with the plastic brewer. It really makes almost no difference at all. So you kind of need a steep phase. To do that, the best way, make sure your sink is clean, obviously. Put your brewer in the sink and, you know, if the sink base is a little bit wet, this will kind of form a seal and you can pour hot water and it will just sit in the brewer and very slowly drain through and do much better kind of thermal transfer, much better heating of the brewer. A few of you suggested another way of preheating the brewer that is kind of interesting. I'll show it to you now. It makes me unsettled and I can't really explain to you why. A lot of you suggested using a kettle sort of to preheat the brewer by using the brewer as a lid for the kettle. Like I said, this feels kind of weird. Don't put it on this way because it turns out this does nothing useful. It just makes the base of the V60 warm and the cone, the bit that you need to be warm, doesn't get that much warmer, it turns out. So you've got to put it on upside down like a funny little hat. I don't like it. It works, right? If you put it on this way around and you boil your kettle, yeah, that's preheated. That's a hot brewer now, so that definitely works. But it's definitely not how your kettle is designed to be used, and so that kind of freaks me out a little bit. Obviously, not every kettle has the right sized hole at the top. Some kettles have little lids. That's not going to work. So in the many cases, this is probably not a viable option. But in some cases, it may well be. Like I said, it feels weird to me to recommend it, but I can't deny it in certain circumstances. It does work to very effectively preheat a brewer, and it would work well for ceramic or glass or metal. That would do a very, very good job. Should it fit? I'm not going to make a third video in this series, but if you do have a great question, I'll try to answer it down in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. If you experiment with different techniques, if you experiment with preheating in different ways, if you are having great success with the brew method or not, I want to hear from you down in the comments below. But for now, I will say thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a great day.